the Orange Zone, sponsored by Apex Entertainment.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of the Orange Zone podcast. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston, and we are wrapping up Syracuse football fall camp. Thanks so much for being here. Be sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. This podcast is sponsored by Apex Entertainment. Thanks so much for being our sponsor. We're here today to discuss several things with you, but chief among them is that Syracuse football has its new QB-1. They decided to go with Steve Angeli. There's a couple different reasons for that, so just so you guys all know the layout of this episode, we'll be discussing that QB battle, how both quarterbacks felt about it, and a couple of our own takeaways from fall camp. Hello, Ashley. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm good. Yes, the big question in this town has finally been answered ahead of football season. Steve Angeli will be the guy under center against Tennessee, and from there on out, obviously Fran gave some details on why he made that choice, on how long he intends to stick with that choice, on what's next for Ricky Collins at yesterday's media availability. But first of all, I would just like to say, this is what I feel like a lot of the media coverage around this decision has been missing. Can we give some credit to Steve Angeli? Like, I know it was a battle and Ricky Collins, a very talented player and the whole 9 yards, but like, let's just give kudos to Angeli for a minute. He comes in here after spring practice, literally the end of April. It is nearly May. Transfers to Syracuse, obviously does not know the playbook, obviously was waiting at Notre Dame for a long time to, work his way up and have a starting role and never got there, and saw some big experience last year in the college football playoff. But all that aside, Steve Angeli came in here very late, learned the playbook, took the job away from Ricky Collins, who was named the starter in the spring and has probably, 6-7 months start time on him.
I think that this is your classic transfer portal success story, right? They don't all work out that way. And there are times where the grass isn't always greener on the other side. But for Steve Angeli, I think this is actually a good example of how sometimes when you bet on yourself, it does pay off. Listen, you mentioned it. Notre Dame is obviously a big time school. You're on a lot of nationally televised games. All of those things, I think, really mattered in this decision because he at least had some of that experience. But for him to be able to work through what it felt like to be a backup quarterback for a while, to transfer here, and then to ultimately win out and win that job, as you said, after someone else was truly and honestly named the starter. Like, we all wrote articles about it.
Yeah.
It really said something about Steve Angeli and who he is as a player.
And not only that, but when he transferred there, as we covered and mentioned many times, there was no guarantee when he transferred to Syracuse that he was going to be the starter. Fran Brown, I think, said at the time, like, it was a fair fight. You come in here, you beat out Collins, then it's your job. There is no world where Steve Angeli, even despite all the relationships and everything, came to Syracuse and was like, this is yours, in the way that it was Kyle McCord's, right? Kyle McCord came to Syracuse. There was nobody else in the room. You're going to start at quarterback. Steve Angeli, that was not the case. And so he really had to fight in a very limited time frame to get this job. So kudos to Angeli. Obviously, we'll get into what it means for Collins in a moment, but focusing on Angeli, Fran said that really the difference, and you kind of felt this all along, was operational. That was Fran's term that he used. It's really like being that game manager, that, offensive, like the quarterback is not only an extension of the head coach, but also of the offensive coordinator, right? Steve Angeli is a guy who might change the call at the line of scrimmage, but he has control of the offense in a way that I think was really appealing to Fran Brown. And I think reminded Fran Brown of what Kyle McCord brought to the table. That started to be my feeling. I thought it was going to be Angeli all along, which I said a few weeks ago. But that started to be my feeling here, that was the difference between the two, right? Ricky Collins has this raw talent, has this arm that everybody talks about, and this athleticism. Steve Angeli obviously has those things, or he wouldn't be playing at the level that he is. But what was desirable about Angeli was like his leadership and his game manager style. Because you know as well as I do, and as well as everybody knows, that Fran Brown and Jeff Nixon, not to say that, they had an easy time last year, but your life is certainly a little bit easier when you have a guy like Kyle McCord, a pro-style passer, a pro-style manager of the offense under center. And I think they have identified that Steve Angeli at least has that potential. They don't know if Steve Angeli is going to, fully work out and be successful in that role. Obviously, that's a risk that they're taking. But I think they see that in him.
I agree. And here's the other thing. Yes, Steve Angeli is a little bit older, and I think that mattered to a certain extent. But one thing I think is worth mentioning is there were, I think, some people, I might be one of those people, who thought that Ricky Collins had more upside. It is possible that when it comes to raw talent and raw athleticism and speed, Ricky Collins actually might have the edge with some of those things, at least from what we heard and what we discussed and what we've seen. He also had that idea of the dual threat quarterback. I think the offense looks and feels a little bit different when he's in. But you can't discount the fact that everyone else on the Syracuse football roster, for the most part, outside of a couple vets, it's pretty new guys. It's a lot of young guys. There were a lot of holes to fill. There was a lot of talent and veteran leadership lost. That's why I think Steve Angeli, in many ways, got this job, is because when you have the kind of team that is sort of in a rebuilding year, for lack of a better word, yes, they have talent in there, but it's a lot of young, new guys. You have to have someone out there who you think has the capability to lead, is in some way a veteran. And I understand that Angeli wasn't a starter, but Angeli had been in high pressure situations. The highest pressure situations that there are. He had played in the college football playoff. He played on Notre Dame, which, let's be fair, in comparison to a school like Syracuse, is probably being nationally televised more. There's probably more eyes on you. I actually really do believe that all of those kinds of things matter, because you look at Syracuse's schedule this year, probably are going to be some nationally televised games, including the first one.
Right.
You need somebody who's been on that stage, who can lead, and who can feel calm in high-pressure situations. That is not a knock on Collins. I have no idea if he's calm in those situations or not, but I know that with Angeli, that's what the players and the coaches continue to echo. He's cool, calm, and collected.
Right.
That mattered here.
Right. And I think there are some years, to further go off of your point, there are some years where maybe you can afford to take that risk, right? There are some schedules, last year's among them, if you don't have Kyle McCord, that maybe you can afford to take a risk at quarterback. You can pick the flashier, more talented, little bit of a wild card pick. This year is just not one of those years. I mean, you start at Tennessee, you play Clemson, you play SMU, you play Miami, you play Notre Dame, you play one of the hardest schedules in Power 4 football, and you have a really young team in almost every position group is seeing some turnover, right? You lose LaQuinn Allen in the running back room. You lose your top receivers. You lose your top tight end to the NFL in Orangge Gadsden. So all of that to say, this is a year that you are searching for leadership, in particular from your quarterback, in particular offensively. You can't afford to go with what would have been the risky choice. Now, this is not all to say that we'll never see Ricky Collins at all on the field this year. I don't believe that to be true. We'll get into that in a moment. But Steve Angeli's intangibles, his leadership, his maturity, his authenticity, all of those were things that Fran Brown mentioned when he, picked him as the starter on Monday. Those outweighed some other things because of the stage that they are playing on in a lot of these games, right? The lights are going to shine really bright on August 30th. You are playing an SEC team, a top 25 team. Tennessee is ranked number 24 in the country right now, a team that made the college football playoff last year. Now, obviously, they're a little bit down in comparison to last year. They lost a lot of guys. Nico's out in California, the whole 9 yards. Tennessee's not going to be the Tennessee of last year, probably. However, when you're playing a team of that caliber in an NFL stadium, you need to know that the guy you are putting out there can handle the pressure of those lights. And Steve Angeli has proven that he can handle that at the very least. And that does matter.
The only other thing I would add to that is, inevitably, in a game, if it's not Tennessee, then the next one or the next one after that, things are going to go wrong, right? You're going to be in a situation where you're losing, or where you need to climb out of a hole, or where there was a dumb mistake made, or where Fran Brown is fired up. You have to be the person that can rally the troops, can make sure that everyone still feels confident, make sure everyone still feels positive, and make sure everyone feels like they can will themselves to a win.
Yeah.
The vibe that I got from the press conference yesterday was that, Fran Brown saying Steve Angeli is the kind of guy who is going out of his way to form relationships with everyone. I think particularly with the guys who he knows that he'll be passing the ball to.
Yeah.
Guys who really will be a part of why he is successful or not. And honestly, for him to have come in a few months ago, analyzed and understood that, and then did whatever he needed to do to ensure that he had good relationships with those people and that the coaches noticed, to me, in some way, that's more impressive than learning the playbook.
I agree.
I mean, this was really, this was a tryout on all fronts for him, and he needed to show, I think, a lot more than just his talent, because I really believe when you talk to Fran Brown and all the other coaches, you see that it was such a tough decision, because from a talent standpoint, I think they were neck and neck despite being rather different players.
Yeah.
Did you get that sense too?
Yeah, I definitely did. I think obviously what we were able, I'm just going to be candid, what we were able to watch this year media-wise was limited. It was more limited than last year. A lot of times the offense would be on the further practice field, and you can break out your binoculars or zoom in on your camera, but you can't really see what's going on over there. So it was a more private camp. I've seen some people on social media sort of air out their grievances about what was put out there in comparison to last year. I'm just going to say it. Our time of practice was more limited. What we got to see was more limited. All that to say is we saw a lot of Collins in the spring. Angeli was not here in the spring. We got more up close and personal looks at Collins in the spring. But what we did see from both of them is, look, everybody's talking about Steve Angeli's intangibles, and to be clear, I think that is what won him the job. I just said all of that. I think that's what pushed him over the edge. But don't make any mistake that this is obviously a very talented quarterback. He served as Riley Leonard's backup. He has not had a starting job, but what he did at Notre Dame, right? He went out there, started in the Sun Bowl in 2023, started in the national semifinal, played in the national semifinal game and the national championship game last year, led drives down the field. He is a proven passer. He had a passer completion rate of over 72% coming from Notre Dame. Now, obviously, he's not in all the high leverage spots, and I know that. But a proven passer, a guy who is mobile to a degree. I would put Steve Angeli as more mobile than maybe a Kyle McCord. Now, Ricky Collins had them both in that area. But Kyle McCord, you sort of felt like, that was the running thing, right? He never wanted to use his legs, never wanted to. Steve Angeli can move. He's athletic in that way. I think he prefers to be a more traditional pocket passer like McCord. But that isn't to say that you're going to completely eliminate him from that area. All that to say is I think that Steve Angeli got to Syracuse 3 months ago and saw a real opportunity here, and he went out and he took it. And that's something that you have to credit to him, right? Fran Brown doesn't just hand out starting jobs. He doesn't just hand out playing time. If you're interested in that, you can go find yourself a different program, which players have already done. Some of his top recruits, right? Marcellus Barnes leaves last year. Guys who aren't interested in that type of competition have already left. But Steve Angeli embraced it, and now here we are. And I think it'll be good to see him, I guess, embrace this role as his own, because it's also been a unique camp in the way that this hasn't been anyone's team yet, right? It was like sort of Collins' team, but then they bring in Angeli so quick. You knew they were going back and forth. This is now Steve Angeli's team, albeit the season starts in 11 days. But for the next 11 days, he's your leader.
I think it is important that you point out that part of the reason why even we were unsure as to whether or not it would end up being Angeli or Collins is that I do feel like viewers should know this was a different kind of camp than it was in Fran Brown's first year. And I'm not necessarily sure why that is. I do think the quarterback battle was obviously a big part of that. But the way that they have camp set up, they essentially have two fields, one that's closer and one that's further away. And I will say you were seeing a lot more defensive reps. They were doing their best for a while to hide some of that stuff. And while I'm at it, I will say one other thing. If Fran Brown's whole idea is dart, I think as far as the camp is concerned, it is worth pointing out that we would go there sometimes and be hanging out and waiting around for an hour or more than an hour to see and talk to some of these players. So this is just my honest, it would be my honest feedback to anyone who's involved with that camp, that if the whole idea with Dart and D is that they want to be detailed, I think, to be fair, they could have been a little bit more detailed about what time we should be there at and giving us clearer expectations about what it is that we would see when we arrived. I'm just going to throw that out there as far as improvements I think could be made for fall camp the next time around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm obviously not going to sugarcoat it. There were many times we were out there in 90-degree heat waiting an hour from the time that was on the sheet. So yes, the detailed in Dart. certainly we could use some detail. But all that to say, yeah, we finally have an answer to this quarterback competition. Steve Angeli is the guy against Tennessee. And I'm excited for him. I'm excited to see what he does. Now, Fran Brown did make it clear. He was asked yesterday, is Angeli going to get a quick hook here if things start to go awry against Tennessee? And his answer to that was no. He said Ricky is one snap away from playing in the game, but he meant that on an injury front. He did not mean that on you have a few bad drives and you're seeing Ricky out there. So Angeli's the guy, at least for Tennessee. Now, obviously, we have to point out that in week 2 and in week 3, they welcome UConn and Colgate to the Dome, two obviously non-Power 4 opponents. That's going to be a little bit of an easier playing field. So I'd be surprised if you don't see Collins in one of those games, right? UConn's no joke. They went to a bowl game last year. Colgate now has Kurt Fitzpatrick, the former coach at Cortland, moving up from the Division III level, who won a national championship there. Neither of those teams, deserve to be overlooked. But if Syracuse wants to be the caliber of team that they're hoping to be this year and in the years beyond, those are the games that you need to win and win by a sizable amount. So are those opportunities to see Collins out there? It's certainly possible.
It's certainly possible, even when you think from an injury standpoint and depending on how much they're up by. I totally agree. And listen, I think that it's worth taking a beat on Collins too. All right. We were obviously, many media members were asking questions about Collins yesterday, essentially saying, hey, how did he take that news? Because it was really close. And that has to be really disheartening, because if you think about it from Collins' standpoint, I mean, he was announced as the starter a couple months ago. His family, his friends, everybody knows this. We write articles, people congratulate him, just for it to be stripped away. That is a really, really tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And I have to say I give Collins a lot of credit, because Fran Brown was essentially saying, hey, he did a really good job taking that news. He was a trooper. He understands that he's one snap or one injury away, and that him and Angeli are still close. That takes a special kind of person to be able to hear that hello. It takes a special person to be able to hear that news.
Yeah.
And still compete.
Don't get me wrong. I think that Ricky Collins knew it was a fair fight, but if you are Ricky Collins on April 23rd or whatever the day is that Steve Angeli's transferring in, you have to know that they're not completely secure with their choice. It's one thing to want to deepen up your quarterback room, which they said all along, they needed another depth piece there, but it's another thing to bring in a guy the caliber of Angeli that is going to be fighting for that starting spot. So, I give Collins credit, at least for now. Of course, I'm sure he's upset. I think it would be, not a natural human emotion to not be upset. But the reality of the situation is Kyle McCord played the entire season last year, and that is a real rarity, both for Syracuse and in the entire college football scope. Quarterbacks get hurt. Quarterbacks get dinged up. Quarterbacks, jam a finger and are out for a half. Like, there is a real likelihood that Collins will see the field either in some of those lower leverage games, like a Colgate game, or if, God forbid, Angeli does get hurt, then that you have a guy that can step up and really be competitive out there, which is what Fran Brown said yesterday. So, I feel for Collins a little bit. I do, because he transferred here. He was here before the bowl game last year, was in San Diego. That was our first sighting of him, was at the Holiday Bowl from LSU. He's a Louisiana kid. Like, he grew up in Louisiana. He went to LSU, did not see the path to starting there, came to Syracuse. Now he's 1,000 miles away from home. He's a backup quarterback, a redshirt sophomore, didn't earn the job again. You see where I'm headed with all this. But it will be interesting to see if he stays in December. Obviously, we're going to have to see how the season plays out and all of that. But it'll be interesting to see if Collins stays beyond the season, because worth pointing out, Steve Angeli is a year older than him. So Angeli is a redshirt junior, has 2 years of eligibility. Collins, a redshirt sophomore, has 3. Of course, there's a lot of factors there. If Angeli does really well this season, does he go to the NFL right away? I'm apt to think that Angeli's probably a guy that needs 2 years of starting at the Power 4 level to be considered for the draft. And obviously that would have to go well if that were to be the case. So then Collins has 1 year behind. It just gets messy. Maybe Angeli does leave after this season, has a really great year, and just goes to the NFL, and then it's Collins' job, and then he's happy. So all that to say, we'll have to see it play out, but I think that Fran Brown made the right choice, because I was starting to think about it just this whole week, and like we said, the leverage of Tennessee, you can call it the safe choice if you want to, but you can also just call it the wise choice, right? If Steve Angeli goes out there and gets smoked against Tennessee, if that happens, hypothetically, everyone's going to say, all right, he picked the quarterback that had the experience and had the veteran presence. If it were the other way around and Ricky Collins went out there and got smoked against Tennessee, everybody and their mother would have been like, Fran Brown is an idiot. Jeff Nixon, why would they have the guy who has the experience in the national semifinal game, the national championship game, sitting on the bench? What would have happened there, coverage-wise and media-wise, and I'm not saying that that's why they did it. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying where that would have been headed would have been down a dark path. So at least now, if you're Fran Brown and his staff, you know that you made the choice that made sense.
Or at least made sense to other people. And again, that's hard. Like, we don't know. Obviously, it made sense to them too. I think that Fran Brown, when he says that he is genuinely losing sleep over this decision at night, I'll say it, I don't think he is thinking so much about the media. I think he is really thinking in his head, who is the best quarterback here and who's going to be able to lead my guys. That happened to, in the end, be the guy who also had the experience. But I know what you mean. And I think now, listen, it's Angeli's job to keep or to lose.
Yeah.
I think if you're Collins, you absolutely have to hang around this year, man. Compete. Continue to challenge Angeli. Be ready for your opportunity when it presents, because it will. And then once people get to see you in a game, they get to see your style. Who knows? Either that might mean that you're getting more reps at Syracuse. It might mean that you have tape for the next place. Who's to say? But I think if you're Collins, especially now that you've transferred once, you kind of just have to be in it at this point. You made a decision. You made a choice. Now stick with it. And great news for Syracuse, to your point, that they have two guys who they actually think could step up in that role. Because I'll tell you what, if Kyle McCord got hurt last year in game 1, what a different year 1 that would have been, don't you think?
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Last year we would have been looking at Michael Johnson Jr. or Jakari Williams. Who Jakari Williams, by the way, one beat on it, is sort of a forgotten man this camp. I'm feeling a little concerned about Jakari Williams. We've seen him out there with the quarterbacks, but even like Fran's talking more about the freshmen now, like Luke Carney and Rich Bellin and Jakari, you want to put money on something? I mean, I don't know, but Jakari is feeling like he may not have a place on this team in the future, in particular if they keep Angeli and Collins. So I guess we'll see what happens, but you got to feel for Jakari there too. But yeah, all that to say is he made his choice. Now he's going to stick with his choice. We'll see how long he sticks with his choice if things transpire. But, the good news is that you have talent on that bench. I know the whole saying goes in the NFL, like if you have 2 quarterbacks, you really have none. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have a really talented one. But I don't think that's the case here. I really think that, like you said, it's Angeli's job to keep or lose. And if he loses it, you know that Collins can go in there and at least be competitive.
Hey, 2 other quick beats on things that we wanted to point out as we're sort of wrapping up our takeaways here. Fran Brown yesterday was also asked about Demetrius Samuel Jr., 17 years old, playing corner, playing wide receiver, 2-way player that obviously has garnered some national attention. Fran Brown said yesterday that he will be starting at cornerback and getting some reps at wide receiver.
Yeah.
So truly, as advertised, y'all. Like we said this earlier a few weeks ago, but if there was somebody who was going to bring some national attention to the program besides the quarterbacks and the big names, this is one of them that you really need to look out for. And it is amazing, remarkable, no matter which way you slice it, that this kid is 17 years old, should be in high school right now, and is going to be their starting quarterback. I mean, wow.
Yeah, I know. Shout out to Demetrius Samuel. I think, he came in here with the message that he wanted to be a 2-way player. Fran Brown and the staff wanted him to do that. He got here in the spring and he was 16. Devin Grant threw him his 17th birthday in the spring, which they were telling us about.
That's so funny.
Very delightful. Devin Grant said, what do you do for a 17th birthday? Who knows? But yeah, Fran Brown said in the spring, after the spring game, that he wanted Samuel to start at corner, and he is keeping true to his word, or it appears so. That's what he's saying ahead of week 1. Samuel had been adamant all camp long that he was really 50-50 with the reps. Honestly, I could see, and now this makes sense, that he was with the defense more of the time than the offense. I think any player, right? Travis Hunter among them, like last year's Heisman winner. The 50-50 thing is absolutely amazing and deserves a lot of kudos, but it does have to be more like 60-40, 70-30 somewhere. That's just sort of the nature of the game. So they appear to like him more as a corner. I think he will get some reps at wide receiver, but it will be interesting to see really, up close and personal how Fran Brown and the staff deal with that, because the kid can't play the entire game. That's just football, right? So how they split his time and where they sort of rotate him in and out will be interesting to watch, but they do appear to like him more defensively right now. And he's a very mature young man. You can go back and watch any of our interviews that we posted with him. He is 17, but really mature individual.
I completely agree. I think it's a rare instance, but it's one of those instances where I think he truly was ready for college. And now he's around a lot of guys who I'm sure feel like brothers, Sim, who are older, who he can learn from. He has a very bright future ahead of him. That is for certain. Beyond that, one other name that we wanted to bring to your guys' attention is wide receiver Jonte Cook. This is someone who, across coaches, alumni who attended the scrimmages, the players, it's a name we're hearing. It's a name we're hearing a lot. He was a Texas transfer, and at Texas, he had some troubles. Really no way around that. He was arrested twice. He now is in a place where everyone is saying, it's funny because the things that you heard about him at Texas, it's really been a 180.
Yeah.
He is a leader. He is a great person. This is what they're saying about him. and he's somebody who's going to make a gigantic impact on the field and is extremely athletic.
Yeah, Jonte Cook is, I mean, of course, no secret, right? He goes to Texas, has some run-ins with the law there, has 5 minutes at Washington, has some other issues there, whether it was being kicked off the team or whatever it was. So Syracuse, I think, gave him a chance to revitalize his career, right? Fran Brown has said that the conversation he had with Jonte and with his parents was about giving him a place to have some structure and to really focus on the on-field performance on the football field. Everything we've seen from him on the field has been extremely impressive. He made a one-handed catch at practice yesterday that was circulating on social media that was insane. It was like behind the back. It was so nonchalant. I think Jonte Cook is... surprise isn't the right term because people know about him, but I think he's really going to make an impact this season, obviously filling some of that slot role that Trevor Pena left, but I also think, you'll see him running some deeper routes as well. And I think that he is, or at least has to this point, stepped up to the challenge that Fran Brown gave him, right? Stepped up to that, challenge of maturity and leadership. And Fran even told a really impassioned story a couple weeks ago at camp about Jonte being out there, playing catch with his son, Braden, Fran's son. It was like Collins and Jonte, and they go out and run routes with Fran's son, who's like, I think middle school age, like 11 or 12, 13. So all of that just shows maturity and shows that his head's in a good spot right now to hopefully see that on-field success as well.
Totally agree. Any other takeaways that you have from this year's fall camp before game week, which is truly right around the corner?
So crazy that it's almost game week. Just have to say that. That gives me the shivers in a good way. No, I would say that I'm happy that the quarterback thing is settled. I really was hoping that we had an answer for that before game week, and we do. So that makes me happy. It is interesting to point out that this is the second year in a row that, and we did some coverage on this yesterday, that Fran Brown has a quarterback that he's known since the quarterback was a kid in New Jersey. He has known Steve Angeli since he was in high school at Bergen Catholic. Obviously, Angeli played for Vito Campanelli, brother of Nunzio Campanelli, SU's quarterback. That whole connection to the Campanelli family, we know about that. But everybody talked about Fran's recruiting when he came in here, right? Best recruiter in the country from Georgia, the whole 9 yards. I think you're seeing just how deep those recruiting ties run, right? We're still bringing in guys that Fran has known for years and years and built those connections in New Jersey. Fran even told a really funny story yesterday about how Steve Angeli, when Fran was at Rutgers, used to blow him off and not answer the phone when Steve Angeli was in high school. But now Steve Angeli has answered the phone, and he is Fran's starting quarterback at Syracuse. So funny how the tables turn.
Funny how life works out, man. Hey, well, you guys know it just as well as we do. Next week, Tennessee in Atlanta, August 30th, is going to be on ABC. It's a part of a college football triple header. Ashley mentioned it. Bright lights, and we'll have to see how this team performs. Again, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we will see you back here when the next big thing happens.